is just figure out what all this means. So Kathy's been doing a ton of research. DJ's been doing a ton of research. Neal's been doing a ton of research. I've been also looking into this and trying to figure out what does it all mean, but I can't do it on my own. So I thought we'll bring the experts in. And so we brought Neal Bawa on. Neal, if you could just give us a bit of your background before we start diving into the questions. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Why are you on this webinar with us today?
Sure. Reformed technologist, data scientist, all-around geek. Love playing with numbers and trying to understand what those numbers mean for investors and for profits. I'm on this webinar because I've made lots of mistakes, and hopefully I've learned from them.
Awesome. And so we've also got Kathy Fettke, and good friend, amazing human being. If you don't know her, you ought to. Kathy, what do you do within real estate? Why are you on this webinar today? And then we'll go into DJ right after.
Yeah, sure. We've been helping people get into mostly 1 to 4 unit buildings, mostly single family homes in the areas that have the strongest job growth and population growth and affordability and tax benefits. So, following the demographics basically and helping people take advantage of getting up to 10 loans. Fannie and Freddie will give you up to 10 loans. And today locked in these low rates is pretty great. So I know a lot of our people are refinancing. We also do syndications, building single family home subdivisions and a little bit of commercial as well. What am I doing here? You invited me, and I appreciate that because it's been a really emotional, to say the least. I might cry right now, but it's been an emotional couple of weeks because I have asthma. I've been screaming, trying not to sound hysterical, but trying to warn people. And it's been a lesson in that's, like persuasiveness and lack of persuasiveness and people thinking you're absolutely nuts. And at the same time, I don't care because my mission was to save lives. So think of me what you want. I hope I save some lives.
I'll just be completely honest. I may have been in the camp of why are we worried about this? Is it really going to be this big of a deal? And I stayed very quiet for a long time and just kind of watched and tried to learn. And it kept progressing, and it made me do more research and more due diligence and reaching out to people like Kathy, Neal, DJ, who really like data and really like to dive in and think the real reason we even kind of pulled everybody together today is just to kind of decipher that, and to decipher it, not just is this a big deal, but really when you look at the data, is this something that's going to affect real estate prices, going to affect our businesses? Because there's a lot of fix and flippers out of the 60-ish people that are on. There's a lot of them are fix and flippers. A lot of them are developers, or they're trying to get into this. Maybe they own a house, and we just want to answer the question. And so I will promise anyone who's listening right now that we are going to speak from a place of like Neal said, data science, really just pulling this together and not coming from a place of hysteria, but coming from a place of discernment. So DJ, why don't you introduce yourself as well? Share with the listeners a little bit about what you've been going through lately and what you've done so they can kind of understand that next level.
Sure.
With you.
So I'm DJ. I'm a co-founder with Adam of Blue Spruce Holdings. My background is mostly, I guess in a way I'm kind of like Neal, that I'm mostly a tech guy. I spent 25 years doing mostly startups and really got to be good at the technology, but got sort of tired of the business model. And I started looking around and focusing on real estate about 4 years ago. And it's really the last 3 years that we've been actively acquiring multifamily properties. I would say I was kind of halfway between Kathy and Adam. I thought this might be an issue a couple weeks ago, but it wasn't clear to me. And I don't remember the exact moment, but I started kind of doing the game theory about what happens if this many people lose their jobs, what happens if the government does or does not respond, what happens. And it's really interesting. I went on BiggerPockets And there's a thread there that started about 2.5 weeks ago that's about coronavirus. And it's people asking, what's going to be the effect? And at first there's so much, if you read it, I read it all the way through. There's a lot of skepticism and, maybe it might hurt things in the short run, but I'm out still making offers. And I mean, maybe that makes sense in their market, but the more you read it, the more sort of tense the conversation gets. And so I'm just glad that we're out here talking about it and not just kind of holding up and just praying.
Yeah.
Right. Because I mean, it's a huge challenge. It's in many ways like nothing we've ever seen any time in history, where the entire world is kind of locked up like this. And so that's why I'm a little nervous about making any kind of extrapolations from current data. Like if you brought me a T12 today for an apartment complex, that doesn't mean anything to me, right? If you're 95% occupied, what are you going to be in August, and how many people are going to have jobs? So we really have to kind of be skeptical, look to great resources like Neal and Kathy, but just recognize we're still very early into this crisis, and there's a lot of things that can happen.
I think it's super early, and maybe I can kind of explain why there's so much skepticism on bigger pockets and everywhere else. So if we're the Avengers, this is Thanos. We have never faced anything like this before. Not 2008, not 2001, not any recession, not even the Second World War. Because this is an enemy that moves at an exponential pace. And human beings don't understand it. The reason we're having trouble understanding this is because we think after 1 comes 2, after 2 comes 3. Or we think that after 10 comes 20 and after 20 comes 30. We've never dealt with a villain where after 10 comes 100 and then after 100 comes 1,000 and then 10,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million, 100 million. And all of that just happens at a pace that we cannot deal with because nothing else in our world multiplies 10x. And this thing does. Mm-hmm. It's unquestionably the worst thing that we've ever encountered. And I don't think that we're set up to deal with it. And that's why so many people are struggling with it. I remember on 1st of March, the United States had 75 infections. Mm-hmm. And then on the 15th, we were at 4,000. And then yesterday, we had 2,000 plus infections. And in 9 days, we'll be at 20,000 infections. How do you deal with that? What other thing have we dealt with before that actually is similar to this thing? Certainly not 2008. It took months for that crisis to develop. Here we'll be dead if we don't act on this. We'll be dead in weeks. Mm-hmm. So it's a completely different animal.
So I think there's a lot of parts of this that it makes it difficult to completely predict how it's going to affect development, how it's going to affect jobs, how it's going to affect our residents from paying, how it's going to affect cap rates. So I want to try to see if we can shed a little bit of light on that. And so the first question that I have is going to be for Neal. And Neal, if you could just explain your thoughts on just the likeliness of having a recession over the next, couple of months, over the next couple of years. What might that look like as you're looking at data and not just being hysterical?
So the thing to point out is, unlike the last 10 recessions, this one moves at the speed of light. So, God only knows what's going to happen next year. But the US already entered a technical recession. Now, keep in mind that you're supposed to be negative GDP for 6 months before a recession can be declared. But today, there is no doubt in my mind that we are in a recession. And here's why. Here's why this is different from everything else we've seen before. Let's say that there's an industry, and we'll call it the aviation industry, and it's $1 trillion. In all past recessions, when an industry goes into a recession, we say, oh, it's going to go down 3% or 5% or 10% from where it is today, right? $1 trillion. where in normal times it grows by 3% or 5% or 10%. So we always have this baseline of that $1 trillion because that's the size of that industry. We've never come across any time when an industry's baseline has entirely disappeared to the point where 90% of the airline industry's revenue is gone, 90% of the hotel industry's revenue is gone, 90% of the restaurant industry is gone, their revenue is gone in 2 weeks. So bottom line is this is very fast moving. And in my mind, those previous measures of it takes 6 months of negative growth do not matter. We are in a recession, and this could be the sharpest recession in history. But if we rip the Band-Aid off correctly, it may also be the shortest recession in history. It may never qualify for that 6-month rule. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to feel horrible while you're in it. And I think we're in the first 2 weeks of that recession.
Okay, first 2 weeks of the recession, Neal Bawa. Okay, Kathy. One of the things I know you do a lot of development, and you're providing houses 1 to 4 units to investors, and you're going into places where they're really increasing population growth, job growth. My question for you is just kind of based on what you've been doing over the last few years and what you're kind of projecting out. What do you see for demand in housing because of this, what's happening with not just, stocks going down, but also with coronavirus right now? What do you see happening with demand for housing? Are people trying to get out of cities, et cetera? What would you say your take is on that?
Well, as you know, because you've had me speak a lot and we're friends, that I have been cautious for a while and telling people to be cautious and telling, at the end of the day, what I've been doing for 20 years is trying to help people tap into their feminine side, I guess is the best way to say it. And we spend we've turned into a nation that has kind of given our power away. And there's far too much trust in authority figures. And it's the same for Europe. We've had people in power poo-poo this when they didn't listen to the scientists. And we have evidence now that it was in Europe as well that they decided collectively to let it run its course, so that it would hit in a immune, what do they call it? The herd immunity, which means that once enough people get it, then you have an immunization. So these are decisions that are, made by someone else, and far too many people put trust instead of really looking at what was pretty obvious. It's the same as 2006. It's like, how did so many people not see the problem when it was so obvious? So, we just put a lot of faith in other people. And I think this is hopefully a time for people to just come back and go, what was my sense about it? And what, if I were, in worst case scenario, and this is what I kept telling people, worst case scenario, what if it's true? What if it's a deadly disease? I mean, the first thing we did was cancel our events just because what if it was true? And I was responsible for people. I just was like, I'd rather just do an online event. And then if I'm wrong, so what? We still did an online event. So I think with everything and how I've been treating our company and our decisions over the past several years, because I knew that there were underlying issues with our economy, meaning massive amounts of debt, lots of companies that have shown no profit yet, overvaluation and so forth. So there's a lot of underlying issues that, I was willing to move forward and help lead other people in moving forward, but very cautiously. So we were only recommending people buy rental properties in areas where there's massive job growth, massive population growth, and affordability and tax benefits, that these areas have tended to not be so affected by recessions. We did it in 26. We sold all the high-priced bubble properties in California and bought in Texas. People thought we were nuts back then too. I'm pretty used to being called that because we do things. I see things that other people can't see because I look for it. I have to, and so we could see that. And And there's people, and when the people who bought houses in Texas, I mean, we didn't feel the recession in those homes. So, we went with the same strategy. And very interestingly enough, I do believe, I mean, in answer to what Neal said, I do believe we're headed for a recession that was due. In my 2020 predictions, I said there's very possibly a black swan we can't see that is going to topple this because it's not built on fundamentals right now. And I didn't think it would be a sickness, but here it is. So
Yeah.
the question, I mean, everything we've done when we raised money for developments, we didn't take any debt because I didn't want to. Developments take years. So you don't know what is going to happen in 3 years. You can't predict that. There's no one who can predict that. And to predict it is, you can only do your best guess and have a backup plan. So our backup plan was, we're just not going to get any debt because there could be a recession. And if you're trying to sell homes and you've got a big bank loan, construction loan, I mean, that's what took the builders down last time. So we just didn't. We just raised all cash. We bought the land, we entitled it, we built first phase, sold that, used the profits to do the next. So kept that real conservative. I'm not worried at all about our developments. We'll just sit and wait, which is what we told the investors. Hey, if there's a slowdown, we sit and wait. We own it free and clear. Now, what's shocking to me, because I had questions about, well, what about these little single family rental homes in Florida and Atlanta and Texas and Ohio and, where we're promoting these areas. I reached out to all of our property teams across the country and said, what are you seeing? And I had a gut feeling this would happen, and it is happening, that people in New York are getting the, out of New York, because in a crisis like this, you don't want to be around so many people. So our sales are going through the roof right now. People are moving to Florida. It's warmer. They want to be in a single family home away from other people. So we're putting houses on the market and they're selling in a day. So, and the same with rentals. So as far as our business, I think we're going to be busier than ever, but it's not by chance. It's because I look for what people can't see. And I know Neal does too. We look for the invisible.
If, Kathy, if you could maybe sum up your thoughts or impressions or expectations around like the demand for housing globally, what does that look like in your opinion?
Well, I can tell you what, I had Harry Dent on the Real Wealth show yesterday, and you take it or leave it, but he's an economist, and he's been pretty doom and gloom because he saw a lot of the things I see, which is a lack of fundamentals and, the ability to print money. And that's not, it's unprecedented and it's not going to end well. So, he's been predicting a massive depression, and it's been delayed because we have the ability to keep printing money to put it off. But shockingly, and it's on YouTube now, and it'll be on the Real Wealth show soon. The first thing he said is, we're going to be through this crisis in about a couple of months. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, all you have to do is look at China. They contained it faster than we did, as did South Korea. They are communists, so they can tell people what to do. It's real hard. It's like herding cats here in America because we honor freedom over everything, including our own survival, apparently. But, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to go live my life. That's what I heard a lot. And it's who we are as Americans. We're land of the free, which in this case was maybe not the best thing, because in China, they could corral people real quick, make them stay at home, and they got over it and they're past it and they're back to business. So that's what that was really cool to hear Harry say that, is that if we can come together, shut down. I mean, you guys, come on, what's so bad about 2 weeks at home, man? Come on, enjoy it. So it's like, that was the other thing. It's like, it's not that bad. It's not like we're in an earthquake or a tornado. I mean, some people are, but like, we're just being asked to stay home. It's what we've all been dreaming of. Do it, and I'm loving it because I haven't been home in years. So anyway, he said, finally, we're implementing these things, and it's not that far off because of the herd immunity, which means that it looks like the governments have been allowing this to be a slow process on purpose. They didn't want to quarantine everybody immediately because then you wouldn't get the herd immunity. So they needed enough people to get sick. It's a sick concept, but it's a fact, and the paperwork is out now. So they
ended up saving lives because of it, right?
And saving lives because of it. But that means that a lot of people are going to get sick. And that's why you got to just trust your gut on some of these things and protect yourself. I've been home for 2 weeks. I haven't gone out of the house because I'm not getting that thing. But this is what we know. So I think Harry said we're going to get through it. And in a few months, the market's going to come back in time for the election. And, he said that when a stock market drops 40%, it's a buy signal, because it's going to come back up before the election, because we'll be past this by summer, but it will come back likely next winter is what he's thinking. And that's when we'll see the much deeper recession. So there's a little time, according to him, for what that's worth. In the meantime, stay safe. And
so let's, to any panelist that wants to reply to this, let's think about, so Harry Dent just came on Kathy's show and says, basically, we're going to be done with this in a couple of months. And so
probably 3, not a couple, but probably 3.
Let's say 3
Where's
months.
the real Harry Dent? I mean, somebody kidnapped Harry Dent and put an imposter in his place, because he's always so gloom and doom, isn't he, Kathy? I was
like, literally like, I thought I was going to cry in this interview, and I was like, but it makes sense because.
But it makes sense. This thing is too fast, right? You cannot treat it like a recession, because it is like, it's an event, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like something that goes on for a long time. It's going to hurt catastrophically, but for a very, very small amount of time compared to anything that we've ever encountered, because for better or for worse, it's 100 times faster than anything that we've ever seen.
It's going to be like a tornado. It's going to do damage and massive. I mean, you heard President Trump today. They're building ships outside of New York and California for the sick. So people are going to get sick. It's going to be hard. The next 3 months are going to be hard, and it's also going to offer enormous opportunity in many ways. People are going to finally have that thing that they've wanted, which is time with your family, time at home, time to remember what matters. I've been personally traveling like a crazy person, and people wonder where's Kathy today? I've been in a different city every day, and I've been forced to be home for 2 weeks, and I forgot how much I like that. And I mean, we're having, so, and it's going to give people time to finish the projects they've been wanting to do. There's also, it's going to be hard for a lot of people too. And this is when maybe this is the chance for America to come together and realize we're all people. We all have feelings. We all want really the same things in the end. We're not enemies. So let's just take care of each other. Let's take care of the senior citizens and now they're finding out that millennials, and I posted this on Facebook and someone attacked me or whatever. I'm so used to it. I don't care anymore. But it's like millennials are the ones who thought, well, we're immune. So they were out, at concert kissing everybody. And now they're really at risk,
I think, I just want to jump in. I mean, I try to be optimistic, on this. I think though the biggest challenge is how much we don't know about what we don't know. Right. So the testing has been very slow. We don't have to get into why or who to blame. It's just a brute fact that we don't know how many people actually have this, and how quickly it's spreading. And for example, the Seattle cluster. If you followed this, there's been a huge cluster in Seattle, and the fact is, there's probably a huge cluster everywhere in every major city. Yeah. It's just that Seattle happened to have a test. They developed their own test at the University of Washington. So we really don't know. I mean, I think also when the economy does shut down like this, it's kind of like a nuclear reactor, right? You don't just walk in and put the keys in and turn the switch and you're back on, right? It's going to take a while for supply chains to work out. Right now we're still mostly in super defensive mode. Like the big three, they're shutting down operations. So they're not building cars. I read somewhere they may get involved in helping to build respirators. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, we've certainly seen, Neal, I think your comparison to World War II is apt, because it was a terrible shock to the country to have to cope with that. But during that period, our industrial capacity literally went up tenfold. We started building ships and weapons and supply systems, and it's a shame that millions of people had to get involved in a war to do that. But when we came out on the other side, we were in phenomenally good shape. The other thing, I'm only kind of half joking about this too, is with the market crashing. I think one of the challenges with the stock market is, like I said, data. It's really hard to value a stock if you don't know what their earnings are. Like you were saying, Neal, you project it's going to go up 2% this quarter, or maybe they're going to miss it and be down 2%. But what happens if they're down 80%? So, I was joking that, well, this is fixing the wealth inequality problem, right? Before long, everyone's going to be a lot less wealthy than they thought they were.
If they're in the stock market, though. I agree with some parts of what you said, but I don't agree with other parts. So in real estate, whether it's single family or multifamily, we live in quarters. Because you cannot lose a property even if you're not paying your mortgage for 3 months. And I heard that Trump announced today that the housing development board is suspending foreclosures and evictions until the end of April. So it might be longer than 3 months. The point is, if my multifamily property gets affected, or if Kathy's landlord doesn't have tenants, we have a quarter to react, a minimum of 1 quarter to react. The point is, this thing is so fast that it'll be over before that. So to me, I think what really gets slaughtered are stocks, which are real-time assets, where real estate is a quarter-by-quarter assets. And I think that Harry Dent is right. I think that this thing, for better or for worse, because there's a worst-case scenario where it overwhelms our healthcare system.
It will
right?
overwhelm it.
Yeah, it will overwhelm us. But if we, what we'll do is we'll pull it back, right? The more it hurts us, the more quarantines we'll get. And so this is going to be a ziggy-zaggy game over the next 2 months, trying to stay ahead of an invisible enemy. And I think sooner or later, we do what China did, which is bring the military out to the streets for areas that are refusing to shut down, right? I love this country, and I love the fact that everyone can speak their mind. But in this one instance, we are at a disadvantage over South Korea, which technically is a democracy. But look at China, look at Hong Kong. The Hong Kong economy is reopening. The Chinese economy is reopening. It can happen here. It's reopening 6 weeks after closing. Ours can reopen 6 weeks after closing. And if that happens, what is really the impact on real estate? We had a bad 2 months, and we live in a world where things are measured by quarters. How much of an impact can you get?
Low interest rates.
Yeah, that's right. That's a positive impact, which is going to stay up for a year or 2 years.
Going to be there for a while. Yep.
Yeah. I started to ask a question, and we've gone in a lot of directions since then. I definitely want to at least bring it up because I think it's a question that a lot of the people that are on this webinar are listening to this right now have. And so it was back again, it was about Harry Dent saying, that this is going to be, let's say, 3 months. So the question for anyone who thinks that they have like pretty good insight on this is the repercussions that are going to happen that could be perhaps outside this 2, 3, 4 months that Harry Dent was talking about. And so let me bring some of just my thoughts to it. Is a lot of Americans, even the Americans that are making $300,000, $400,000 a year, many Americans have maybe $400 in savings. They have credit card debt. They don't have huge 401ks. And I think the question that I think is on a lot of people's mind is, yeah, sure, this might be over in 2, 3, 4 months, but like what's going to happen to the owners of the apartment buildings? Because right now there's servers that right here in Denver, restaurants are closed. There's no servers, and they might have $400 to their name. Their rent here in Denver is $1,000, $2,000, and it just doesn't feel sustainable to to continue that. And so people are, student loans, the government has says, hey, no student loans anymore. Don't worry about your payment. The HUD came out today, Trump saying that you don't need to worry about your payments. You're not going to be foreclosed on. And so if you could just try to extrapolate and go out into the future of what are the bigger repercussions besides just how long the health crisis is going to be, and really what's going to happen if people are out of work for 2-3 months, what's going to happen with them having to change jobs, what's going to happen with owners of rentals, owners of apartment buildings that their tenants cannot pay rent. I owned a multifamily back in 2008 and 9 and 10 and 11, and it was a struggle with what was it, H1N1. It was a struggle with the 401ks becoming 201ks, my tenants, my residents losing their jobs, and it was literally a 3-year process for me to finally lose that apartment building in 2011 from what happened in 2008. So with all of that said, which of the panelists who are on want to speak to, is this going to last literally 3 months, or are we going to have some of these same repercussions that we had in 2008, 9, 10, 11?
When one of my presentations, I'm telling you, sometimes it's challenging being me, and I do it anyway because I care. And I guess, this is one of those times where I'd really rather not say I told you so, but, it's just like, I really wish I were wrong on this one. But, one of my presentations, I said, what happens is bankruptcy. Money can be created easily and it can disappear easily. And the way that it disappears is through bankruptcy. You just write off the debt. So there will probably be bankruptcy. There'll be forgiveness for that. Just like before, there'll be foreclosures. There'll be forgiveness for that. There'll be a lot of government intervention and a lot of debt forgiveness. That's the best way I can look at it. And at the same time, those who were not paying attention to fundamentals will get wiped out and start over, like many of us have in the past, and why some of us take precautions today because we don't want to go through that again. So, if people were, and this is what I was preaching for a long time, if you're writing and underwriting based on one scenario of rents only going up, you might want to also have that, just have a backup plan. And that goes for everyone, backup plan. People have been spending like crazy. Kids have been going to concerts that cost $1,000, and people haven't been saving. So I think that might be one of the things we start to see is a little honing in. Do we need as much as we thought we needed? Do we need to be running around as much?
Yeah. So there's at least 7 listener questions of the 86 people who are watching live right now. There's at least 6. And I have a ton more questions to get to. And the next one that I think is on a lot of people's minds is, so I canceled my March trip last week. I canceled my April trip to Jazz Fest with my sweetheart. We're canceling our mastermind in May. I'm canceling a trip for the real estate guys cruise because I'm still afraid of it in June. But the question begs differ. I was planning on going to Europe in the end of June, July. We're saying that this should be done in like 3 months. So it sounds theoretically like I'd be totally fine to head to Europe the end of June. So what do y'all think? Like, should we be traveling in June, in July, or cancel all those trips too?
I'll jump in. I don't think we should be traveling then. I think the challenge, a unique problem with this one that was not present with H1N1 is we don't have a vaccine for it. And herd immunity is built on vaccine, right? It can't just be like smallpox where a bunch of people get it and die and then whoever's left is now immune. Vaccination is a critical part to herd immunity. So while, I hope we can get to where China and South Korea are and where Hong Kong are, just if you look at what was happening with H1N1, they declared a public health emergency after the first diagnosis. 1 week after. So and they declared a public safety, public health notice. And it was about 6 weeks later that they had a vaccine, and they started doing massive vaccination, over 1 million in the next 6 weeks. And we don't have that. Now, there's been some promising news of people working on that. And I have no doubt, I mean, we have some very smart scientists all over the world who are tackling this from different angles. So I'm hopeful we'll get one sooner, but no one is out there saying we're going to have one in 3 months.
Okay.
And most people are saying a year to 18 months. I'm optimistic. I think that, like I said, we have a lot of very smart people working on this. I think it will come sooner, but it's going to take a while. And then I guess the other thing is, from an operations standpoint, Neal is 100% correct. We don't have to react to what the Dow did every day, and that's a great advantage of this asset class. But we really do need to sort of think about what it means for any current deals we're working on or ones we were thinking about doing. Like, I would not look at anything that, and I imagine the banks are going to do this too. If you got a very low debt coverage ratio where you really need that operating cash to make the monthly mortgage, that's going to be a challenge. And I'm optimistic that the government is going to jump in and do something. And the things I'm hearing them talk about, I think, are reasonable and hopefully not turning into a political food fight. That's the last thing we need right now, is for people to be trying to get their pet projects or punishing their pet enemies or whatever. So I am optimistic that that's going to happen. But again, thinking in terms of risk, we have a transaction that we're in right now that I can't talk much about it, but this has dramatically changed the way we think about the transaction. And so I would ask everyone to kind of reevaluate what it is you're doing right now. Now, Kathy obviously is in the right spot. She's selling houses in Florida. But for larger assets, multifamily assets, I would be a little more cautious looking at those ratios.
Got it.
Basically stress testing the deals.
Got it. And just to be clear for those who might be listening later on the podcast, when I asked the question if I should be traveling in July, all three panelists all shook their head no. So it sounds pretty unanimous based on that. To get to one of the first listener questions that's just live, listening to us right now on the webinar, they're asking, Emma Powell, she recently closed on a complex that has several non-payers. They've been delinquent for several months, and they can't file any evictions. Obviously they're not able to do this. So she's asking, will there be any exceptions to get people out who were already behind before this situation, or should they just be focused on rehabbing their vacancies instead and deal with non-payers in a month or so?
Your options are limited at this point in time. I think that the biggest thing that every multifamily landlord is hoping for is that we get huge non-payment just in April and May. If that's the case, and if Harry Dent is right, then in June, things will be better. People will be getting employed again. So if people are unemployed for a month or two, your world's not going to end. The way I look at this is, there is no way that multifamily gets away with making the same profits as we did last year. That there's a 0% chance of that. But if all that happens is that multifamily basically doesn't make profit for 1 year, the year of 2020, I think we're all phenomenally lucky. And then we'll have a normal 2021. So here's the base case scenario, and it's based upon the Dent equation, if I call it that this will be over, that we will go into quarantine and we'll burn it down at least the way that South Korea has, or Hong Kong or China have. We'll burn it down to a level where it'll be bubbling in the back end, and daily life will go on with some precautions, maybe not international travel, but domestic travel being restored. In that scenario, I don't think you need to worry much. You need to manage your communities. I can tell you, I have some communities that have some delinquency, and here's what I'm planning to do in April. And this is very specific to me, so take it for what it is. Until April 10th, we will do nothing. We want to see what our delinquency rate is. You know, if typically by April 10th, we get 80% of people paying, and this time there's 60%. We're going to go back to those 40% that haven't paid, and we're going to offer them to basically give them a free month. And let's say their rent is $1,000 and they've got 6 months left. So they owe us $6,000 over 6 months. We're going to say, we're going to change your lease. We're going to edit your lease. So you get this free month because you're unemployed right now, you get a free month. And then you will pay us $1,200 a month for the remaining 5 months. So we will amortize this month's rent over the next 5 months. I have studied the SARS, crisis, and the apartment communities that were affected. They did that, and it was very successful for them. So I suggest that you consider doing that. At that point, the tenant has nothing to lose. If he's planning on not paying you at all for the next 6 months, it's just a piece of paper for him. So he's going to sign it. But when he gets his job back the next month, he's going to think differently, because at that point, being evicted is an inconvenience. And if everybody gets their jobs back in 2 months, then the eviction order comes off, right? So at that point, people can get evicted. So now it's an inconvenience. Bottom line is, prep for a really bad April and a really bad May. The question is, what happens if there's a really bad June? Well, if it's a really bad June, stop paying your mortgage. Because if this goes on for 3 months, I can tell you in June, I am not going to pay mortgage at any one of my communities. Why? Because there's a $250 billion bill out of that $1 trillion that Trump is asking for, and it says small business. Every community I have is under $5 million a year in revenue, so they all qualify as small businesses, correct? I'm going to go and ask for relief from those guys. And to do that, I have to not pay my mortgage. So in June, none of Neal Bawa's communities are paying mortgage if we have a 40% delinquency.
Yep. Interesting.
That's great.
All right.
Yeah,
Katie, go ahead.
I was going to say, you can also choose forbearance on your loans and just not pay for 3 months, and then they'll put it on the back of your loan. I do just want to say one correction, and there's 3 ways to cure this. One is to do what China and South Korea did, which is completely require people to, self-quarantine. We didn't do that, so we missed that. The second way is to find a vaccine. We're not going to get that. The third way, which is what we are doing, is the herd immunity. And what that is when people get sick and they recover and now they're immune. They have a vaccine on their own. And when enough people get sick, then you basically have more people that have recovered and are now immune. And most people will recover. This is not that bad for most people. In fact, many people don't even maybe know they had it. That's why this virus is so bad, is you can be totally sick. You can be carrying it, but not even know you carry it for 2-3 weeks and feel nothing, or a mild cold or a flu. So now those people who had it are immune. So that's what the herd immunity is. And that's the choice that our country took along with Europe, which is we didn't do the other things. We didn't restrict people from moving around. So instead we're going with people are going to get sick, and that's how we're going to become immune. Okay. Unfortunately, about 1 to 2% of those people will be very sick, but the rest won't. So that's what Harry Dent was saying, is that just, it's going to burn fast. It's rough. People are going to get it. Most are going to be fine. But because of the high percentages, there's a high percentage that will be sick. And that's why we should be through it by June, July, something like that. This time around. It might come back next year. But anyway, to the next question.
Okay. Katie Fleming is mentioning that she's been really proactive with her own tenants at her properties. And she's just wanting to know from the panelist if there's any resources that you know of that have been identified to date that she could share with her tenants to help them pay their bills, including their rent to her, right? So she's guessing that it's going to take some time for anything that Trump has discussed. So she's wondering that, plus any other resources that panelists might know in order to help her residents, her tenants, pay their bills.
I'd like to offer a resource. So this question's been coming up a lot. So we've decided to build a website that's a public service site. It doesn't capture your email address. It's coronavirusrealestate.com. I have 2 people currently researching every such resource, state by state. Obviously, we're doing the states that my properties are in first, but I have them in 9 states. So that's about 1/3 of America. But I intend to keep going. And so in about 4 or 5 days, every resource that you can offer to a tenant indexed by state is going to be on coronavirusrealestate.com.
Thank you, Neal. So what we'll do is in the show notes and Neal or DJ, if you wouldn't mind just putting coronavirusrealestate.com in the notes of the webinar as well, in case somebody wants to click on there. But that'll be a great resource for any listeners to say, like for Katie Fleming, who wants to know what she can offer to her residents, I think in Colorado, or maybe they're out of state in Ohio, then awesome. You go to coronavirusrealestate.com. Susan, I think it's Guzbeck, but it's not a last name that I can pronounce easily. So Susan is asking, she'd like to have some commentary on the economy right after 9/11, 2001, compared to the economy that you see over the next 3 months. So if somebody could speak to that.
DJ?
So I wasn't in this business then, but I was in business. And I think, 9/11 was a really traumatic event, but it was sort of coming on the heels. The economy had already been slowing down, and it was the nail in the coffin, right? It was like, okay, the dot-com hangover, that's never coming back. I have a chart somewhere of, there was a stock back then called, what were they called? It was a guy, it was an analytics company, and the CEO was worth $1 jillion and committed all this money to charities, and then the stock just fell off. And if you go look at a chart, it's like from 1998 when they went public, it's kind of like this, and then it goes way up, and then literally for the next 20 years, it's just here. I mean, it just never recovered. It's still a going business, still a going concern. They have profits, they have customers, but the mania is gone. So 9/11 was a huge shock, but it was still a temporary shock. We basically knew, okay, looks like we're going to go to war, so we're going to spend a lot of money there. The airlines are in bad shape, so it's going to take a while to get out of that. But it wasn't even 2 months, that the airplanes were grounded. It was about a week that the airplanes were grounded. And in the meantime, people could still go to restaurants. They could, as a matter of fact, that was kind of one of the messages from the president was go out and spend money, keep the economy going. It was really the opposite of what we're seeing now. And so that's why, again, what we've been saying is there's really nothing like this in economic history.
My feeling, and I'd like anybody who agrees to just kind of share that, and anybody who disagrees on the panel, please bring it up. My opinion would be, restaurants, for instance, it's a tough business to run a restaurant. They're not always profitable. And this is a big thing for restaurant owners, especially when they can't bring in the revenue, but they still have most of the expenses, many of the expenses. It just seems like it's going to be a really hard thing. And so my suggestion or my thought is, regardless of what we're doing, there's going to be a natural tendency in times like this and in times like 9/11, in times like 2008, where the human reaction is going to be to clam up and to not spend the money and to save and prolong what you're doing and to prolong that whatever you have in reserve so that you can outlast a storm. But my impression personally is that if you do that, it slows the economy down longer and stronger. And so I would be suggesting to people that that are thinking between the two things to find a way to keep stimulating the economy. And I just wanted to find out from the panelists, are you more on the side of, yeah, you definitely need to save this money so that you can last yourself longer, or are you more on the line of keep spending, keep filling the economy because that's what's going to keep us going? What do you think, panelists?
It depends on what you believe, right? If it's going to be over in 2 months, then why stop spending?
Well, I just have the opinion that we've been living kind of like the 1920s. I showed a slide like that in my 2020 predictions of people are living like it's 1929. I mean, I've been going out for $500 dinners, treating people, finest wines, and and we're seeing that across the board. So I do think it's a pulling back of, oh, okay, yes, let's do that, but also let's make sure we've got 10% in savings. We've got 10% set aside for emergencies. We're investing. We're, thinking about a rainy day. We haven't really been thinking about that. So rainy days happen, and, you want to make sure you're prepared. And that's why in underwriting multifamily deals, the reason I couldn't find anything is that we do err on the side of conservative. And because I lost everything in 2008, I just wasn't going to do it again. And I'm too old to do it again. But when you're young, you learn, and then you don't do it again. But in oh gosh, I forgot what I was going to say. Anyway.
Well, that's okay, because there's more questions queued up from listeners currently than we could probably get into if we went into a lot of detail. So I'm going to keep throwing these out at you and see if we can knock out all of the questions, because we just have so many. So the third question is from an anonymous attendee who's asking, where do you see most of the financial strain in apartment industry? Class A, B, C, or D?
In the future?
Yeah, because of this, which one's going to get hit the most?
C is going to get hit the most, in my opinion.
C?
Yeah. C is going to hit the most. D, it's really hard to tell, because sometimes at D properties, you have ongoing delinquency that's 30 or 40%. So because the jobs that are hit are predominantly blue-collar jobs, airlines, like, Atlanta airport shutdown had hundreds of thousands of employees. All the retail is all blue-collar. Those people live in C's. In my mind, this hurts C's. It doesn't hurt the guy in B because he worked for the government or he was a school teacher. Those people are still paying salaries. Remember, my wife's off. She's a teacher. Her salaries are getting paid. It's the people that were in retail and the travel industry. They're all in C's. I think C hurts the most.
Yeah.
All right. Next question, correction. Which apartment class do you see? I think we did answer that. Mm-hmm. So basically, to that anonymous attendee, the panel looks like they feel like C might be hit harder than the other three apartment classes out there. So Dee Dee Stump has a question. And so she's saying, even if we have a quarter to recover in our mortgage payments, she says, I foresee everyone or many being so far behind that it will, it's moving up and down. So, okay. Let me go back to where we were. Even if we have a quarter to recover in our mortgage payments, I foresee everyone or many being so far behind, it'll be a challenge for anyone to really catch up on the past due payments, making hard for her to make her own past due mortgage payments. Any insights, any thoughts on that remark?
I remember now what I was saying is when we were underwriting multifamily, and the reason we couldn't find anything is we were going extremely aggressive on reserves, just, in case there's something we don't know about in the building. I've been down that road, as you know, and for vacancies. And that's what we tell single family homeowners too, is like have reserves in place for a rainy day. But with that said, I think the government is going to do massive stimulus because if indeed this burns through the public by, and it's a fast moving virus, burns through the summer. It's somewhat past, and then Trump's going to give it everything he's got to get reelected, right? So I think part of that includes making sure people's, have a forbearance where the lenders just say, okay, you don't have to pay for these 3 to 6 months. It just goes on the back of the loan.
What do y'all think on this stimulus? Because, Mitt Romney came out and said that he would suggest $1,000 per American. And in my own personal opinion, I actually don't think that's enough. My number was closer to 3,000, 2,000 to 3,000 needs to go in the bank accounts of just every American, even to just get through a couple of months, and to really make sure that the economy is boosted and people are excited about spending. So just to the panelists, what are your predictions around what it would take for Trump or whoever's president to help boost the economy and keep us going through this? Do we need any stimulus, or do we need something that's 1, 2, 3, or even higher? What do you guys think?
This is a speculation answer.
Yeah.
I don't think that the government is trying to cut out the pain. They're trying to bring it down to an acceptable level. I think that they're doing the math on it. To be honest, if it lasts 2 months, and keep in mind that each American receives 1,000, kids receive 500, so many families actually will get 1,500 or 2,000. So keep that in mind, because that's a different number. And what they're really trying to do is help you pay for groceries or pay for rent. And they're assuming that you do have $500 in the bank that you can use. The average American has 500. Some people have 1,000. And some people will have families that will pitch in. So I think that those numbers will help. It doesn't eliminate the pain. It doesn't eliminate the delinquency that we're all going to be seeing. And in answer to the person who asked the questions about what do I do if I'm behind on my mortgage, I think Kathy hit it on the head. Forbearance is going to be open to you. It is impossible that the government would shut down evictions without also not allowing forbearance. They know that that's the next step, right? Landlords, it's not to the country's benefit to have hundreds of thousands of properties default. So you will have access to forbearance. You will have access to be able to add these months to the back end of your loan. And I see no reason why you shouldn't do it. I know that in some cases that can hurt people's credit. It's a heck of a lot better than losing your property.
There you go. Yeah,
I would agree. I think, I think $1,000 is the minimum. I can make a case for $10,000, right? And I'm not joking. I mean, because the global nature of that. So in any other normal circumstances, when you inject that much cash in the economy, you're risking inflation, right?
Absolutely.
But now we are stuck in a deflationary spiral like we've never seen. I mean, worse than 2008. And deflation is bad. I mean, that's why the Great Depression went on for as long as it did, is because of deflation. It just really just put a number on things. So, but also I think the other thing is because it's global in nature, pretty much the entire developed world is dealing with this. I've heard talk that the G20 is going to get together and maybe come up with something. It wouldn't shock me to see worldwide stimulus, right? So not just in the US, but literally everywhere. And if you inject cash into everywhere, it's almost like injecting it into nowhere, right? There's no inflation because we're all kind of starting at the same level. Now that is very speculative by me. I take that with a grain of salt, but I do think it's certainly going to be on the order of at least 1,000 or more, and I think there's a case for it to be a lot more. And it's a test of the system, right? It's a good test of our system to have to confront this, because this won't be the last pandemic, right? There's going to be more in the future. So this has been a good learning opportunity for us to prep for that, and I hope and pray honestly that our folks in Washington are approaching this in the right way and making good decisions.
The next question comes from Diego, and it might be 2 questions. So let me go through this for the panelists here. Diego Cardenas says, to dig into the current topic, every landlord has a different situation. But many have fallen for the BRRRR strategy, and those owners are likely in a higher risk of losing it, in where 1 month rent could be their annual net income. And then he goes on to say, what would you recommend for them to do? What would you recommend for the owners that are doing the BRRRR strategy, or just have a different situation altogether, looking at the risk of losing it when 1 month might hurt their net income? So what would you guys recommend to that person?
I mean, honestly, I think we have a little time to just rein it in, take the time to be creative and find solution and make an opportunity. And just to give you an example, my dance teacher, okay, don't laugh, this is off topic, but my dance teacher is incredible, and I don't miss a class. And all of a sudden I had to miss a class. There's no way I'm going to be in a room with other people sweating. So she put it online, and we're all dancing online. And it was like, oh my gosh, her dance class is so good. This could go to millions of people. And all she has to do is charge $25 a month. You know what I'm saying? That's that good.
Yeah.
So she's got an opportunity she never would have looked at before. You do too. Everybody listening, you're brilliant. You're here. You're spending your afternoon with us. You take this time to think about what you can do to create more income beyond from your properties, because you're an expert now, right? You can help other people.
Robert Freeman says, do you recommend buying new deals now as they come available? I'm sure it is. Or do you recommend waiting a certain amount of time? A follow-up, how are you adjusting, planning out your numbers to account for the potential market drop? So do you recommend buying deals? Do you recommend waiting? And how are you adjusting your numbers? Neal, I'll start with you. And if anybody else wants to answer that, that'd be fine. So Neal.
I think the next 60 days is the worst time ever to buy anything. Stop, because you're at the event horizon of a true black hole. You cannot see in, you do not know what the next 8 weeks looks like, because we've never experienced the next 8 weeks. We don't have a way in our history at any point in time to compare and say, this is what I should be doing. You have no data, you have no benchmarks, you have no yardstick. Stop and watch to see how well governments do in their fight against this thing. And if the governments are really doing well, you know that you have a small window of opportunity. You will get a window of opportunity. By the way, the knock-on effects are huge. $1 trillion industry, airlines, are going down. $1 trillion industry, travel, is going down. And it's happening worldwide. So in my mind, there will be plenty of deals to go around. There will be plenty of repossessions and defaults to go around, as long as you don't get greedy. That's going to happen. It's inevitable. The question is, when do you start looking at them? Well, if it looks like 6 or 7 months from now, normalcy is returning to the US, well, you should start looking then, because you'll still get deals if that happens. If 7 months from now, we're still in quarantine, you're going to get a lot of deals, but I'm not sure if anybody's going to have the money to buy them, and I'm not sure if anybody's going to have the money to lend to them. So I'm very hopeful that it doesn't come to that. We get close to normalcy. You'll still get single-family deals. You'll still get multifamily deals, and you'll have a time to buy. But please don't buy anything in the next 6, 7, 8 weeks, because how could you predict anything that is going to happen? We've never been here.
Yeah. By the way, I love that question, and insightful answer as well. Thank you. Daniel Spear is asking, what do you think the chances of a roller coaster will be based on the coronavirus goes away, and all of a sudden now we have something else that's equivalent? What might that be, and what might that do to the economy and possible shutdowns?
Well, there's something every year, right? There's always something. The biggest default, if you want some good ideas for what to invest in right now, I do think commercial debt is going to go down hard. So maybe puts against that.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, share more on that, Kathy. Give some more insight on that. I know that there's other people on the call with you that, are in those commercial assets, but I think it's important that we share all angles of this. So if you feel strongly that commercial real estate is going to really get hit.
Not commercial real estate, commercial debt, meaning
Okay.
a lot of businesses are going to go out that have borrowed. There's been tremendous amount of borrowing. Credit debt, corporate debt is out of control. And so the banks that have lent to those companies are going to be suffering. They may get a bailout, but word on the street that I'm hearing is to buy to bet against. Last time it was like betting against the residential mortgage market. This time it might be betting against commercial lenders. And also I'm being told that because a part of the bailout will be to the airlines and their stock have dropped so much, they're going to get bailed out, and that's a pretty good buy right now if you looking for that, and Boeing as well. So American, United, yeah.
I want to jump in here as well because I feel like this is a true give. I think Kathy is 100% right. Right now, there's a great play in doing a put, basically shorting commercial debt. And if you can short mall operators, strip mall operators, companies that have basically been running strip malls, they're going to be in trouble for long enough that a lot of them will default. And so that debt isn't worth much. I mean, it's just as bad as single family debt was in 2008. If you know how to place puts on that kind of debt, it makes all the sense in the world to do it. In fact, I'm looking to do that. I know very little about the stock market, but if anybody wants to do that and knows how to place puts, please contact me because I'm looking to place money.
I want to know how to do it too.
I know. I definitely do, because
a good book to read right now is The Big Short.
The Big Short, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we want to short the commercial debt market. I mean, it's not going to be single family because there's no bubble there. There's not enough of a bubble there. It's the commercial debt market that is in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of The Big Short is they were just trying to figure out how they could even short it, right? It wasn't as simple as just logging into your Schwab account and shorting a stock.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it either, but I want to
read about.
So Daniel Cardenas has a follow-up. He's saying, to Neal's point, this will likely be a short-lived and immediate effects once this passes, in quotation marks, in 3 months or so. 3 months or so. Anyway, to Neal's point, this will likely be a short-lived and immediate effects once this passes in a 3 month or so question. Do you think that flippers are finished or finishing projects right now should be wait and list until later? So that's first question. Should fix and flippers be waiting? And also, would buying flips now in anticipation for an upswing when it's feeding frenzy in a few months be something that you would recommend?
And this is single family?
Single family question.
Yeah.
It's for you, Kathy.
I mean, like I said, we're actually seeing voracious demand right now for both buying homes and renting them. Now, I don't know, again, like Neal said, this is all very unknown. Nobody knows what's happening next, but we know that there's panic. There's a lot of people in large cities that want to get the heck out of them right now, and they have the cash a little bit left still to go buy a $300,000 house in Florida, So, and especially with low debt. But for flippers, boy.
Yeah, should they wait to list it, and should they be buying one?
I guess it just depends on your market and just checking out demand.
What would they look for? So checking out demand, that would be a big one. What else would a flipper need to know about their specific market to know if now's a good time to buy, or if now's a good time to sell, or if we ought to be waiting 3 months for either?
For me, it's all about the marketing. So, this is what we're doing on our rental properties is reassuring people that they will be safe. And that means that, you have completely cleaned it. It is spick and span, and just catering to people's fears, whether you're trying to sell it or rent it. And, like I'd be afraid to buy an old house right now because I don't know what's hiding in the HVAC, right? So if you can address that and say it's a brand new HVAC and there are no germs, we know because we put this in and had it tested or something like that, I think there would be huge demand. And that's why we're seeing our new homes to sell so quickly, because they are clean.
Great. Yeah, Diego, I hope that is helpful for you to make your decision, or at least to base your decision on. Now, the next question is an anonymous attendee. It's hard to say that still. What actions can you take to avoid bankruptcy as much as possible if these impacts continue for a longer term? What actions can you take to avoid bankruptcy if this has more longevity?
Treat it as a sliding scale. Don't take the same action every single month. This month, we're watching to see if what delinquency is like next month. If it's high, we're going to adjust people's leases, give them a month free, move them into the future. If the following month the delinquency is high, we're going to stop paying our mortgage. If the month after that it's high, now that we've stopped paying our mortgage, we're going to apply for relief from the government. If the month after that is high, we're going to try and raise some money, some short-term debt, which will be available at that point in time in terms of a different bucket. Remember, there's two $250 billion buckets. One of them is just relief. The other one is loans. So we can basically go and get that loan. If by the 5th or 6th month, this doesn't come back, I think that it's going to be very challenging for you to protect that property, right? And at that point, you would sell your general partner share to somebody else to come in and inject debt. That's not a good scenario for you, but you'll still save your property and you'll probably get another 2 or 3 months out of it. That'll take you 6 months.
That process was really good. So I'm glad that we have it recorded because it went too fast. I want to listen to that recording, take good notes of it. The next question comes from Rick Martin. And looking into your crystal ball, which I know you all have one, what physical and economic vacancies should be underwritten in for years 1 and 2 and even 3 with the economy's current trajectory? Awesome question. There's more to it. So remember what I just asked there. And the rest of the question is, Rick says, I'm looking into a deal where the break-even analysis currently sits at 59, 58, and 55% for years 1, 2, and 3. But the return projections reflect only 10% physical vacancy. So, yeah, let's talk about some underwriting.
I'll just tell you real quick what Harry Dent said, and you take it or leave it. No one can know the future. What he said is that we will see a pretty severe recession, even potentially a depression, not because of coronavirus, but only because it was the thing that popped a bubble. And that bubble was the debt bubble. It's just not in residential this time. But it's everything else. And so we will have a reset, and it's a needed one. And he thinks that we'll come out of it, and it will be an incredible bull market starting in 2022, 2023, sometime around there. But we're going to have a couple of years ahead of us that might be challenging. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't rent. I've been through this, and I can tell you that our properties in Texas stayed rented all the time through the whole thing. And many people even saw raises during that time, but we had B-class, really nice properties with tenants that didn't lose their jobs. So we rode right through it. But, depending on the class of the property and where it is, I certainly wouldn't count on rents going up. I would probably underwrite it, even potentially going down a little. I don't know, Neal, what do you think?
Yeah, I think rents might go down a little bit. Every word that Kathy said, I agree with. I think that in my mind, the next 8 weeks are unlike anything that you've seen before. Don't underwrite anything. Just wait and watch. Mm-hmm. At the end of 8 weeks, you'll have a good feel. Right now, you can't see into the future because no one can. It's like nothing we've seen before. But in 8 to 9 weeks, I think you'll start to get your gut feeling back. But if I had to guess, I would say occupancy, which in the US is at 95% today, is not going to be at 95% even if everything goes back to normal. The knock-on effects of a $10 trillion hit mean that we are going to be at a lower occupancy rate for the next year.
Tariq Sitar has a question as well, and it's just kind of trying to determine what we're looking for over the next 60 days. So Tariq says, if there's one thing that you recommend that an owner or asset manager must pay attention to very closely over the next 60 days, what would that be?
Infection rate in your community. Basically, if your community has a high an infection rate, some infection that happens, you need to immediately follow CDC guidelines and disinfect that apartment, because if news spreads, you're going to lose a very large number of tenants. Stay on top of your infection rate. Hopefully your community doesn't get infected, but there's a low chance of that happening if you have a big community. But if that infection happens, move at the speed of light, because you'll lose a dozen tenants if you don't. And message your tenants.
Yeah, communication.
Communication is critical. If you don't have an email list and a text message list of your tenants, message them. Immediately after you finish the work, you've disinfected those apartments, message them. Have you noticed how many companies are providing high levels of touch messaging? The moment you finish, let your tenants know it's taken care of. We cleaned everything up. If you have a concern, come talk to us. You do not want 10 of them to disappear overnight because they think your community is infected.
Great. Vlad Philippe has a question. He's speculating that the residential market's going to be affected. So his question is, won't the residential market be affected eventually? Like, won't you see prices go down eventually because of this? That's the question. Thoughts?
I mean, I think it gets back to what Neal said. We don't know. I mean, yes, any protracted shock like this would affect it. But we're so early in that I just discount anything anyone says, predicting it. Because, like Neal said and Kathy said, historically, we've never seen this before. So yeah, it's probably going to affect it. Is it going to happen in the next 2 months, 6 months, year? It's really hard to say. I mean, I do know liquidity in general is going to be what everyone wants. Everyone's, whether they're an investor or an employee, they're going to want to hoard cash and hold on to cash, and not be as excited about pouring everything they can into a new home. And the lenders aren't going to like it either, right? So far the banks seem to be pretty stable right now. I hope that continues, but if that starts to destabilize, then it really starts to have, as Neal said, a lot of knock-on effects. So I'm focused on liquidity, minimizing the damage, keeping the operations as lean as possible, and then watching the numbers and see where we are in 2 months. I mean, I've been kind of doom and gloom on this, but I hope I'm 100% wrong. That would be fantastic if I'm wrong. But, and there probably is someone out there right now who's got a giant short position who we're going to read about in 6 months, how they made $2 billion, because they saw the virus early. Well, it's not going to be me. I'm not smart enough. So I'm just assuming everything's going to be a lot tougher for a while.
Adam, I have a suggestion. I think
Please.
This is one webinar that you should actually repeat 4 to 6 weeks from today. Because I think this, unlike the last 5 or 6 crises, we're going to know a lot more in 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'd be more than happy to bring everybody together again and touch base on that. There is an insane amount more questions. I don't know if we're going to get to them, so I'm going to be a little bit picky and choosy.
I'm going to link real quick to a CoStar video. We actually tried to get someone from CoStar to come on this, but they put together a really nice video where they talked about the different sectors of real estate, what they're seeing in their data sets, and it gives a really broad overview, not just of single family or multifamily, but industrial, commercial, office buildings, things like that. So that's a good link to go to. Another one's from First Trust. They are a little broader. Let me make sure I've got the right. Here we go. First, I'm putting these in the chat room, by the way, for those who are not clear what I'm talking about. They're a little broader. They're kind of looking at the stock market as well, not just real estate, which does affect, indirectly affect the way people view this asset class, and it's going to have follow-on effects. So I strongly recommend watching those. Those have been very informative. And I had one. Well, Neal, actually, I want to ask you, Neal, because I've seen a couple questions along these lines. I think you'd be good to answer this. When you and I talked yesterday about putting this together, you mentioned just at a very macro level the difference between need and want.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We're going to talk about that more in your webinar, but maybe you can fill us in about that.
Yeah. I think that this particular virus highlights something that we have lost track of, in that there are need-based sectors in the economy and there's want-based sectors in the economy. And I think that this is going to reprice cap rates, and want-based, need-based sectors such as, let's say apartments or self-storage, grocery shopping centers, like shopping centers that are anchored by large grocery stores, are going to see declines in cap rates once we're done with this, maybe next year, right? But I think that hotels and large mall operators and strip mall operators might see their cap rates go up from where they have been, because people have realized just how quickly want-based areas can get affected, right? And I'm strictly sticking with real estate. Obviously, there's other want-based areas beyond real estate that have been affected. But when we look at this, people are realizing that this is not going to be the last pandemic of all time. And whenever a pandemic happens, a whole bunch of these people get wiped out, because my belief is that we're going to see a significant, very, very significant default rates in hotels within the next 60 days. Massive default rate, perhaps even more so than 2008. In fact, I think it almost certainly will be more than 2008. So there's a repricing where people are understanding that need-based assets need to be valued differently from want-based assets. And I think that doesn't go away in 2 months. I think that's a restructuring of the way people think about the risk in these assets.
I've got two good questions that I'm being able to pull out real fast. One is from Mike Vaughn. He's basically just asking if we should be paying out distributions this quarter and next quarter if we did make enough money, or if we should be holding back for more reserves. So that comes from Mike Vaughn. And another question that I think is really good that Neal, I think you specifically would be excellent at addressing it, is thinking about all the different asset classes. Just if you could shortly brief what's going on, what's going to happen maybe with multifamily housing, with self-storage units, with single-family rentals, with mobile home parks. Are there some more resilient asset classes out there? If we could get those two questions before we jump off, I think that'd be really, really helpful. So reserves in the quarter for the quarterly distributions, and then what asset class ought we be looking at?
The answer to the first question is very simple. You would be absolutely insane to distribute to your investors. Mm-hmm. Stop distributing right now, because if something goes wrong, they will blame you later for distributing in the middle of a worldwide crisis. It is your job to stop distributing. Do not distribute any cash to anyone. At this point, if they don't understand, they're not true investors. Mm-hmm. Number two, so here's my thumbs up and thumbs down. Multifamily, thumbs up. Industrial, thumbs down, because there's supply chain disruptions, there's shortage of consumer goods, there's slower economic activity, so thumbs down there. Office, definite thumbs down. Hospitality, huge double thumbs down. Retail, huge double thumbs down. Storage, thumbs up. And when I look at how REITs have been hit in the last 30 days, the biggest hit has come to senior housing and skilled nursing. So skilled nursing and senior housing stocks are down 49%. That tells me something. That tells me that people are seeing that class may be hit for a little bit longer than the rest of the market, followed by hotels, which are down 36%. Malls are down 29%. Manufactured homes, surprisingly, are down 28%. I don't think they deserve to be. I think that's a resilient access class, and and will do better. Strip malls are down 24%. I'm surprised that they're not down more than that. Office is down 23%. Multifamily is down about 23%, simply because it's such a huge component of the real estate market. And then the one component that I think, if I had to pick one area in real estate that I believe is going to do better, it's not multifamily. I think it is medical office buildings. That is an asset class that is going to get repriced positively as a result of this. Single family rentals are going to do okay. Obviously, you know, if the recession is really steep, it goes down, but it comes back up. I don't think there's anything wrong with single family. Self-storage. So self-storage is the asset class that has been hit the least. Self-storage REITs are down only 16%, which makes a lot of sense. I'll tell you why. Even the person that is going to not pay you $1,000 next month because he got laid off, he's going to pay the $50 for his self-storage unit because it's auto-deducted from his credit card and he doesn't think about it. It's going to take him 3 to 4 months to figure out that money is going out of his bank account.
Yeah. And on top of that, just with self-storage, like the eviction, it has completely different rules because you don't actually live there. Right? So they kick you out immediately.
They kick you out. So to me, the stock market is doing you a favor and basically leading you in the right direction. The only one in that list that I was a little shocked by is manufactured homes going down 28%. I think that they're a very resilient class and they do well in the time frame. So I'm surprised to see that. But the rest of it, self-storage, medical offices doing really well, makes perfect sense.
Very last question that we can address on the show today. It comes from Sheridan, and he's asking the best time to invest in real estate this year. And I'm going to throw out my idea. My idea is based from everything that I've heard from the panelists so far, it's definitely not within the next 2 months. But it's also way too early to tell. We're not going to be able to answer that question on what month, what day of the year until we kind of have to get over this hill to be able to see past this hill. We can't see it. We can't tell. Oh, it looks like DJ says the same thing. It's too soon to tell, but wait at least 60 days. Neal, what would your thought be?
Ask us in 2 months.
Ask us in 2 months. So
right back here in 2 months to do this. I mean, that's a great idea. We'll plan on reviewing the ongoing apocalypse and see how we're all doing.
It was great to have so many attendees viewing the show today. It was just awesome to see the interest in us being able to make sure that we are doing what we need to be protected and safe as the economy can change over the next few months because of this crisis. Neal, thank you for your time. Kathy, thank you for your time. DJ, thank you so much for all of your insights. Everybody for joining the show. Let's end it. It looks like everybody's saying just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So just grateful to be a part of this and to know that there's people out there that care to make sure that we're trying to be as educated as possible to do the best job that we can for ourselves, for our families, for our residents, for our futures. So Neal Bawa, thank you for your time. DJ, thank you for your time. Kathy Fettke, thank you for your time. I'm going to let you go, but until next time, think outside the box.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.